Hello, I'm Christine Storry. I'm the Partners in Procurement Energy Network Project Manager. PIPEN is part of the SPP Regions project, and we represent the southwest of England on this particular European project. This module is one of a series around sustainable procurement, and we're looking at circular procurement today, and it is just an introduction. Circular procurement is nothing new, but the essence of it has actually been taken forward in a much more proactive and productive way. Again, this is no in-depth look at circular procurement, it is just an introduction and an overview. To recap on sustainable procurement and life cycle costing, because life cycle costing very much comes into circular procurement, sustainable procurement takes into account economic and social and environmental issues and how they can be used to improve the delivery of a contract beyond just the financial delivery within procurement, and also very much in balance with each other, but also within the envelope of the rules and regulations that dictate and govern public sector procurement. For example, the EU Directive 2014, and then your own organisation's policies and procedures, but also always within your organisation's needs and purchasing needs. Lifecycle costing looks at acquisition costs, operation costs, maintenance costs, disposal and end-of-life costs across the entire length of a contract. So it's going beyond just looking at the upfront purchasing or lease costs, but actually all the way through to disposal and end-of-life. Make sure you get the full value of the contract, and that's where life cycle costing fits into circular procurement. To start with, just a little bit on the circular economy. So the circular economy is a way of ensuring that waste is minimised, materials are maintained and resources are maintained to be used again, either as a product itself or actually be recycled and reused, refurbished and moved on. You're looking at resilience by design. So actually, how can you design in durability of products to make sure they continue and not just for that one-off purpose? How can they be moved forward to be a useful product again? Can they be restored, regenerated, and looking at the whole framework right from the start of the process instead of leaving that to the end? So in essence, it's moving away from make, take, dispose. So buying something, using it, and then just throwing it away. We don't have the resources globally or locally to be able to do that. Waste becomes a product with a value. It's not just waste to be disposed of. Designing in that reusable value and designing in longevity, making sure you get out inherent obsolescence. How can that work and how can that be done? Designing in durability, making that product hard wearing, and then if bits are known to be a little bit more vulnerable, how can they be repaired, and making it easy to do that and to put replacement parts in. Leading to circular procurement. How can actually procurement work with these issues to make sure what you're procuring and what you're specifying isn't just the take, make, dispose model. Like everything in sustainable procurement, there's no agreed definition of circular procurement, which is fine. It's a fairly loose concept, and you can work within the parameters of that when you're actually looking at procurement. Work within the principles I mentioned before about designing in longevity and designing in reuse. Reusing the product chain, so actually right at the start, all the way through to beyond what actually your use of that product is. Ensuring that you're closing material and product loops within your procurement specifications. Think about the end at the beginning, what's going to happen to that particular product or goods, piece of equipment. A fairly trite statement saying circular demand creates opportunities for circular supply, but it certainly does. If there's no demand for these reusable, recyclable, durable products, then there's going to be no innovation in making sure they go forward. The business opportunities to make sure that resources aren't wasted actually just isn't created and doesn't work. And there's more than one approach to it, and we'll look at that in a moment. So for procurement people around circular procurement, there's 3 areas which you need to focus on. Can you do a contract for a service rather than a product? So looking at, multifunctional devices, MFDs, can you lease them rather than buy them? And quite often that's a common way forward. The manufacturer retains control of the equipment. It therefore has a vested interest in what happens to it. They have the reputation. They don't want to waste their money in terms of coming out for constant calls. Procurers only pay for what they use, and that makes sense. You don't want a piece of equipment sitting there not being used when you're paying for it to be turned off and static. Product design, use and end of life. What is going to be the use at the end of life, and how can you think of that at the beginning of the contract? Can it be useful either to you or to somebody else? Can it be reused? Can it be refurbished? Can it be moved on in its entirety to another organisation who may not want the most high-tech piece of equipment, but they're happy with the second generation? And market dialogue, you have to speak to the market in this instance. It's a change of way of them providing goods and services. You need greater transparency. Be upfront with what you want and where you want the endpoint to be. Understand the mutual benefits. It is a different way. If someone is providing you with equipment, they think, great, we can move that on, we can keep pushing new products through. Actually, it's a different business model for them. Know what the market can do. As I've mentioned before, they are the leaders in what they do. Make sure they are involved in this process. They may be streets ahead of you. You may be thinking one specification, they may be 4 or 5 iterations above that, and you just don't know about it. The market needs to know what's proposed. If you don't engage them, they're not going to respond. You're not going to get the right tender responses back. So examples of circular procurement routes. Again, these aren't rocket science. Some of them are very much in place already. So the buy and sell back. The supplier at the start of the contract agrees to buy back that piece of equipment or goods at agreed price at the outset, presumably at an agreed condition, but you know what you're getting back for it at the end of the day. It encourages reuse, refurb, and manufacture because the supplier will only buy back if there's a value in it for them. You can buy and then resell to a third party. That's a little bit more complex on the procuring organisation's part because you then have to sell that third party. But again, it can be reused or refurbished to be used. I've mentioned buying services or product service systems. Very much remains the property of the supplier. Access is provided to the product rather than you actually having the product. And you pay for printers, you pay for the print, and you pay per copy, and that actually builds up, and that's how the contract can get paid for. There's some innovative lighting contracts where you actually just pay per lux. You don't pay for the fitting, that's all down to the manufacturer. You just pay for what you use. And this way the supplier has a very vested interest to make it work for you and very much work for them as well. Hence going back to why you have to talk to the market in the first place. The circular procurement process is very much like any procurement process. You have your policies in place, and up front in this one it ties into a sustainable procurement policy and the general policies of your organisation. Get it through around circular procurement. You're trying to save resources and money. How's that going to fit into your strategy for procurement for this particular contract? You must engage the market. I cannot stress that strongly enough. How's that going to fit into your tender process? It is a new way of looking at delivering contracts, so actually you need to make sure that's understood by everybody involved internally and externally. Who's going to look after the use and contract management? Who's going to be that liaison with your supplier to make sure everything's going according to plan? And then asset disposal. Do you want the money from that asset at the end of it, or are you going to agree, to a sellback situation to the supplier? Nothing new, nothing rocket sciencey, but you have to think of these things to begin with. Behaviour change. It does take behaviour change internally and externally. I've mentioned there's different approaches to procurement. You need to be taking a wider view of your impacts on what you procure. It's no longer okay to just go, we'll do the same contract as last time. There's different ways, there's better ways of doing procurement. And that leads to the need for improved dialogue. As mentioned, both internally and externally. Talk to the teams within your organisations as to what they want. They might have done something similar before. Again, externally to the market and to your peers in procurement and sustainability experts around your particular area or country or networks. Don't reinvent the wheel. Somebody's doing this somewhere. See what's available and use that. Later on, as you get more experienced at it, actually go for it. And we can change behaviours. We can make behaviour change fun. And very much in procurement, that's quite an odd thing to say, but actually this stuff is really good results and very satisfying results that actually what you've done has made a big difference. There's quite a glow about that. I mentioned at the start that circular procurement leads into life cycle costing, and it very much does. Life cycle costing considers acquisition costs all the way through to disposal and maintenance costs. Circular procurement considers product characteristics. So designing out waste, which actually is your disposal cost at the end of it. It's just a different way of looking at it. Procurement, therefore, can help define the characteristics that's needed to take that appropriate route forward. And that can then be measured through life cycle costing, either at the needs analysis stage or actually through evaluation. And both of these are equally as important, but circular procurement and life cycle costing do go hand in hand. And again, the SPP Regions project has done a very good best practice report on circular procurement with some really good examples, some very concrete examples. I think there's about 13 of them, really worth having a look at. Thank you. That's my whistle-stop tour through circular procurement. As mentioned, please look at the SPP region site for more information. It is useful. They have got some really good reports on there. Thank you.